Hey, what's up everyone? I was not supposed to make this video, but I really need to get it off my chest. Today I want to explain to you why, as of now at least, I believe this patch should probably go away and has really not accomplished what it was supposed to do at the beginning. So I want to start with the obvious one, which is the worker start. So the worker start went from 12 to 8, and the idea at the beginning was to increase the variety of strategies available. The reasoning behind it is we have too many workers, therefore the economy spikes very rapidly, so the damage you deal in the early game and different tech path you go for don't have as much impact anymore. Therefore, if we lower the drone count, the worker count, then different technologies will have more impact in the game, and there's a new tree of possibilities that will open up and players will play more strategies and new stuff and so on. Well, this is actually the opposite that happened. Low Rainbow made a post that explained from a Zerg cheeser perspective that he actually believes there's less options when it comes to cheeses. I've read Printf, the Cannon Rusher, complain, or was it him, or at least there was a thread about him that said that basically Cannon Rush was nerfed. Well, personally, I don't think it's a bad thing, but you know, at least that's still a cheese that's less viable. And overall, my personal experience playing, at least as Protoss, is you just have less resources to work with. Therefore, it's you just have less options as a whole, because you just don't have you're broke in the early game, and you need to make a choice. Do I go for X? Do I go for Z? And I think you're more committed as a whole. Like if you do decide to go for a proxy robo, proxy Stargate, or something along those lines, it feels more committed than before. But does it open up new possibilities? Maybe we've not figured things out as of now, but I don't think it's... eventually we will figure things out and the game will normalize at some point, because it's just how things go. The reason why less strategies were seen recently in Legacy is simply because the game has been figured out. We've been playing this game for, I think, 11 years. The last huge impact, the big change, was the mothership core removal in favor of shield batteries, which was in 2017, so that was like 9 years ago. So roughly speaking, we've been playing almost for a decade on a somewhat stable game. So of course we're gonna come up with answers. Even new strategy would pop. Like you remember in 2020 or 2021, I remember the 4-gate glaives, with adept glaives with a prism against Zerg, which was very popular. Zest went all the way to the grand finals of IEM playing this build every single game. I remember clearly Solar complaining in Katowice, saying, this build is so strong, it's so OP, what can we do? And 3 weeks later, nobody plays it anymore, because people have, Zergs have understood how to deal with it, and it's not as good, nowhere near as good as it used to be before. So it has nothing to do with the worker count. It's just we figure things out by playing, by experimenting, and eventually we understand how things work. So builds that once were good suddenly become bad because now we know how to deal with them. It has nothing to do with the worker count. My opinion right now is that the worker reduction at the early game simply has delayed the action. It's not like the game has been revolutionized. It's still the same idea, roughly speaking, but just later. So we're just bored at the beginning, which I don't really see the point. We should actually get going faster to, get the game more exciting, but instead we're slowing things down at the beginning, and then later on we still play the same idea. It's still economy focused and not so tech focused, if that makes sense in some way. So yeah, if the goal of this worker change was to increase the variety of strategies that are available, well, as of now it seems that it did the exact opposite. So it slowed the game down, and I don't really think we have that many new options. For example, Archon drop against Zerg is dead. DT drop is dead because you need to pay for warp gates, and you're so tight on gas with these strategies that even having to pay 100 minerals, especially 100 gas for 4 gateways, well, that's it. The build is just dead. And especially with the larva change making Zerg early game more favorable, it's even easier for them to defend. So these builds are gone. People are saying, yeah, but now you have the pylon that can warp in rapidly offensively, so that's great. Yes, but for example, when it comes to an Oracle into Archon drop or DT drop, in which you will morph the DTs into Archons eventually, you need a Prism anyway. So you have the fast warping. And if you skip the Prism part and you just warp in DTs offensively through a pylon, well, that's basically an all-in. You get surrounded, or you cannot do harassment anymore because, well, you don't have a Prism. Some strategies like you go for like Archon Zealot timing attack against Zerg. These are very popular. You always have a Prism with, because you need to pick up units anyway. So this pylon thingy maybe is gonna favor all-ins at the end of the day, but do we really want more all-ins in the game? Maybe we want more pressures. I don't know what's the philosophy behind it, but I just don't think that that's how it works. Also, the gateway change, it favors defensive play as a whole, because imagine you've got your base, and if you want to attack, you use a warp gate and the unit just pops anywhere in the map. But if you want to make units through a normal gateway, well, of course they make faster, but they need to travel the map, right? And the time you lose that you need to walk across the map is, of course, time that would have been instant had you used the warp gate. So if you want to really reap the benefits of normal gateways, we just have to stay at home, basically. So that's a good defender advantage, but you're not really making the game more dynamic then, because it favors defensive play rather than being offensive, right? If you really want to use normal gateways. But if you want to use warp gates, then what happens? Well, then you need to pay for every single warp gate, making offensive options worse. So what we're seeing as of now, I've been experimenting with that and I've seen some players play these kind of strategies. Take, for example, a PvZ game where you open with Oracle, as you do, and then you want to go into Glaives. So usually what you do, you add a Twilight Cancel, and then you add 3 to 4 extra gateways. You usually have maybe 4 gates in total, and then you warp in Adepts 4 by 4, and then you cross the map as your Resonating Glaive upgrades finishes, and then you deal as much damage as you can. What we see nowadays is you just leave the gateways as they are. Because warp gate research has been completed, adepts just build faster. And then what you do, as you're about to attack, you morph every single gateway into warp gates. So you have 1 extra warp in, and then you just you go for it. But then that's it. You've turned all your gateways into actual warp gates, and then, well, you don't really use the normal gateways anymore. So I really don't see the point of this change. It's also, you need now 2 hotkeys. So you have basically 2 different buildings that produce the same units, which don't really make much sense. I mean, once warp gate is done, then you could morph everything into warp gates. I've seen a lot of players just accept that the warp gate is worse and that you have to pay for them. So they basically try to emulate what they've been doing before. It's just worse, basically. So I think it's especially rough against Zerg, because not only they've got quite a few buffs, to say the least, and of course warp gate is more expensive. You have to pay for each and single gateway, so all the aggressive options are worse, and I don't really know if we won't want that. I think if StarCraft were to go in the right direction, we would need to see more offensive options to make the game more dynamic. Now a lot of players, Protoss players, have given up and just try to play Sky Toss, because you just get overwhelmed by the grand army from Zerg these days. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's the philosophy of this patch behind it, or to me, if the goals were to make the game with more variety and more dynamic, so far it has done the exact opposite. I mean, so far from what I've seen, the game is, at least the action is delayed, of course, because we start with less workers. We have less strategies to work with because we have less resources. And you can even see in PvP, some players are experimenting playing single gate with tech or expand, or just 2 gate and try to put some pressure on the map. You just have less resources. So the less resources you have, the less options you are. I mean, that's pretty much common sense. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just mad. Maybe I'm just struggling to adapt. Maybe I'm just not enlightened enough. I'm not sure. But my first, at first glance, this patch doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. I wrote a few stuff on my notepad. So yeah, and basically because of the Zerg, because the reduction of the worker count at the beginning of the game impacted Zerg maybe a little more in a negative way because of how economy works. They don't have chrono boost and so on. They wanted to compensate that by making lavas spawn faster. But what happened as a consequence of that is that they reached their ideal worker count, 60 or whatever, way faster than they used to do before. And it's a compound effect because the first drone is gonna pop just maybe a second earlier, and it's gonna mine 10 seconds earlier. And the next one is gonna pop a bit earlier too. And as a compound effect, the Zerg can get out of control. And if you add the fact that aggressive options have been weakened due to the Warp Gate nerf, well, it's gonna make life much easier for the Zerg. So of course there are options, there are things you can do, but I think eventually it tends to favor the defensive options because of course now we're gonna figure out new stuff. Home Story Cup is coming this weekend. I'm sure we're gonna have like proxy pylon thingy, some different strategies, but eventually in the long term, these strategies will very certainly be figured out, and we will be left with basically the same game but just slower and worse. And I don't think this is how we want to go about it. And of course there's also small things that are a bit annoying too, like for example the Nexus or CC giving less supply than before really make the build less smooth. I mean, I like when things flow, and really feel like you need to add a random pylon so you're not supply blocked at 42, and it's gonna mess with your build, it slows things down. I don't know, I really have a hard time being positive about this patch, and I just don't think it's going the right direction. Maybe, at least we tried, but I think maybe we're gonna see with Home Story Cup. I really hope Home Story Cup is gonna prove me wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just overly pessimistic, and maybe this patch is actually good. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that, but I really hope I'm mistaken. But Home Story Cup is gonna be a nice crash test for this patch also. But if I were the intern right now, I would wait a little bit, see how it goes this weekend in Krefeld, and if I'm not convinced, I would basically revert everything and go back to what we had before and work on an actual patch that's well thought out. Because I really don't believe that the 8 worker start did any good for the game. Really not. We don't have more variety, and the game has been slowed down at the beginning to reach basically the same state we had before. So with just less strategies available, at least from the Protoss perspective. I have the feeling also that early pools have been buffed. So it's actually funny because overall people say there are less cheeses. Cheesers say that their strategies are less viable or not as good as used to be before. But there are certain builds that seem to be pretty good, and it seems to me that early pools are better because if you go for an 8 pool, it seems that Zerglings get to your side of the map, to the Protoss side of the map, quicker than you had before. But because of the lava spawning faster, it's less of a commitment because they can replace drones. So I've seen games, I was watching like a Wardy stream, and there were games where the Zerg would go quick pool, like, I don't know, 8 pool, 10 pool, whatever, and barely do any damage and still be ahead. So maybe the Protoss response was not as optimal, that's also a possibility. There are builds that's, well, we just need to know exactly when to cut probes and when to optimize things. This takes time also. But yeah, I just don't think it's going the right direction. What else did I write on this beautiful notepad of mine? Yeah, and also the fact that this patch, to me, has been rushed. So we had a long PTR of 3 weeks, I think. Yeah, 3 weeks of PTR. We made tests, and I think there was quite a consensus, at least in the pro scene. Everybody seemed to agree, which much to my surprise, because let me tell you, every time there's a patch, there's always one race that's happy, the other that whine. But for once, this patch has made a huge consensus. Everybody seems to agree, especially among people who play, because of course there are people who don't play and enjoy the novelty and enjoy the chaos a little bit, because you have to admit it's entertaining, and I admit that. But when you play, and it's been a wide consensus for people who actually play the game, well, overall it gave them interest to play because of the novelty aspect. But the quality of life, the enjoyment of the game has dropped. I coach a lot of Protoss players, and they all seem to say the same thing. My builds are messed up, I have a work, I have a dad, and I don't have time to actually learn all the new build. It's frustrating, It felt like I spent years to learn all of that, and now everything has been crushed. I just want to give up. And I've heard that dozens of times already, and I can totally understand the frustration. So we should probably not make the players we already have mad, because we don't really have an infinite player pool either. So, well, I would just love for the people involved in this to admit that they were maybe mistaken. Maybe we could go back, because worst case scenario, it's okay, you can just revert. You can just revert the patch if everybody hates it. I've seen a poll on Team Liquid that said like around 30% of the people said they were extremely negative about the patch, but usually most of the time when there's a new map pool and so on, of course some people are going to be resistant to change. It's always like that. But I've never seen such an, well, I may have seen, but I don't recall in recent history such a massive negative take on the patch or map pool for that matter. So yeah, I'm not sure. Overall, my opinion is that the warp gate change is just not it. It's just not what it should be, because it seems that you have to pick between making gateways or warp gates, but either you go full brood war and you completely rework the Protoss race, and maybe you make the units slightly better as a compensation for them not being able to warp in everywhere on the map, or you just leave the damn gateways like they used to be before. Like, why do you need to change that? Maybe the warp gate technology was flawed to begin with, but now the whole game has been built around it. The stats of the units, the interactions and so on, everything has been built around it. So if you change this metric, you need to change all the rest, which is why they said, oh, well, you know what, we're gonna maybe increase the larvas and so on, because then you need to change every other metric to make things balanced, of course. So yeah, I just even on a non-balance related matter, I would say that the warp gate change is just not fun. You know, when you're Protoss, it's cool, you warp in units here, you have a warp prism there, you can aggress, and now it feels like so many builds have been killed because of the warp gate change, and you need to make units at home. But then as the game goes on, you want to have presence on the maps, you kind of need to turn your gates into warp gates. So then what's the point to even keep the gates into normal gateways anymore? Personally, I don't find it very fun. I know there's a huge consensus among Protoss players that this change is really, really frustrating and not very fun. When it comes to the worker change, well, if the goal was to make the game more interactive, more dynamic, and increase the variety of builds, well, I think you don't need me to realize that that has not really accomplished that goal. And the funny thing is that even now, which is the period where we should see the most variety because of the novelty, we have less different strategies than we used to see before. And of course, now it's gonna get worse, because as the game progresses, as the game gets figured out, these strategies that just came out will also probably die eventually, because people will know that, oh, actually it's not optimized anymore, I will die to this Hydra push, they will know to do X, Y, or Z. So yeah, I strongly believe the game needs a patch. The game needs novelty, it needs to be something fresh, but that's just not it, right? It's just, this patch has failed, in my opinion. We'll see on Story Cup. Once again, I hope I'm wrong, but you know, I used to be mad when I actually competed, because of course the patch impacts pro players the most, because we make a living out of it. But now I'm just on the side, coaching, trying to figure things out, have some fun, and help people out. And I'm just seeing this wave of disappointment and frustration from players who actually play the game. And yeah, I think it would be wiser to maybe wait a couple days, see how it goes, and maybe revert worst case scenario. But you know, it's like in poker, the tilt effect. You know, you play, you've bid more, and then you've put even more chips on the table, and you know you're gonna lose the hand. You know you're gonna lose, but you keep on betting even more. Sometimes you just have to stop and say, okay, next. And I think here, maybe this is the wiser option. Maybe revert everything, or revert a couple things. Maybe you don't have to revert everything, but sometimes you have to admit that you're wrong, and I feel for the intern also, because he's probably getting information from all over the place. People say this, people say that, and then there's this guy say, oh my god, 8-worker start is amazing, and then of course it's shit, as anyone with a brain would have figured that out in about a minute. But you know, it's the way it is, and honestly, I really will, once again, for the 1000th times, I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. But yeah, I'm gonna be casting actually Home Story Cup this weekend in French on Comeback TV, so I will be keeping a very close eye on the action. But I really hope to see lots of different builds, lots of fun, and a somewhat balanced game. But I'm pretty pessimistic about it, and we will see how things go. And I will keep, you know, trying my best to figure things out and publish videos, but you know, as of now, I just hope that the patch gets removed, and maybe we get something fresh. But yeah, that's just not it in my opinion. Okay, this is the... Okay, feels good to whine a little bit. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.